back to another episode of Muddy River Catfishing. So one of the things that I've been asked a lot is, which hook do I use when I'm fishing for catfish? It's a very common question that I get, and so today I decided I'm going to make a video about which hook that I use when I fish for catfish. So the truth be told, I use a variety of hooks when I'm fishing for catfish. There's not one particular hook that I use when I'm fishing for catfish. If you open up my tackle box, you're going to find several hooks, and it depends on what kind of catfish I'm fishing for, the size of the catfish, where I'm fishing, etc. So let's go ahead and go through and talk about the hooks. So the first hook that I use, it's this Eagle Claw snell hooks, the number 8, and I like the red. I'll put pictures back here so you can see. But the reason I use these hooks, you'll find these in my tackle box, and the main reason that I use these are to catch bluegill, because I use bluegill when I'm fishing for large flatheads or large blues. But depending on where I'm fishing, I know that it's possible to catch catfish while I'm fishing for these bluegill. I've shown you guys how I do the bluegill fishing, and I'm jigging the rocks. And depending on the time of year, I'm very likely to drop half a piece of night crawler on one of these number 8 hooks trying to catch bluegill, and I'll set into a 5-pound or even a 15-pound channel cat. So what I like to do is I'll cut off the tail line, and I'll attach my braid line directly to the hook, and it works quite well. A lot of times those bluegill, they'll pull the line in between the rocks, and if you got a good strong braid on there, you can just yank that hook out of there and bend it back to shape, keep right on fishing. So that's one of the hooks that I use. The second hook that I use, the Gamatsu octopus hook, and this is a size 1, and I don't necessarily target small catfish, but I've noticed that there's certain areas that I'll go fishing and the only thing that's really biting is a smaller catfish, and I can tell this because the hook that I normally use is a little bit bigger than that, and they're not really taking the bait. I'm getting a lot of nibbles. So what I do is I re-rig, I put on the smaller hook, and I throw it out, and next thing you know, I'm catching catfish. They may be smaller, but I'm catching them, whereas before I was just getting bites and not catching anything. So that's part of the reason for the variety. Coming up to the hook that I like to start out using, and as always, it always depends on where you're fishing, how big the fish are in the area that you're fishing. The hook that I use is the Gamatsu octopus hook, and this is a 4-aught. The 4-aught, for me, it's just right. It's a perfect size for the shrimp that I use, or for the chum bait that I make, or even a nice chunk of fresh cut bait. So that to me is a nice little multi-use hook that I use when I'm out there fishing. If you want to use a circle hook, I do use circle hooks quite often, more so on my trot lines or on my yo-yos. The reason for that is because of the action of the hook in comparison to these other hooks. I'm more of a fisherman who likes to set the hook. That's why I use these octopus hooks, because you set that hook and then the fight's on. Whereas circle hooks, you let the fish run and you crank the line and reel them in, and the hook is self-setting. I buy these Eagle Claw. They're called Circle C hooks, and I keep a couple of sizes on hand, probably like a 5 or a 6, and these are 7s. So these are the ones that I'll be putting on my trot lines or on my yo-yos, And like I said, the reason for that is those are somewhat what I call self-setting. It's when the fish takes it into its mouth, and as it's leaving, it comes around the corner of the mouth, and it'll hook them right in the corner of the mouth. So that's ideal for leaving the line out that you can't set a hook on. That size hook is great for live bait, bluegill. Depends on, of course, the size of fish in your area. These hooks, I have no problem putting them on a trot line and pulling out 30-40 pound flatheads. And it's always live bait or a big nice chunk of cut bait that pulls in the bigger fish. So moving on to the last hook that I have in my tackle box, and some of you guys may think that this is a little in excess, I guess, is this big circle hook right here. And this is a 15-aught circle hook, and I picked these up actually because the Sportsman's Warehouse here in Las Cruces went out of business, and these things were, I think, like 70% off, so I grabbed about it, whatever they had on the shelf. But I mainly save these hooks for lake fishing. I always say the bigger the bait, the bigger the fish. And I mean, you're going to talk to a lot of cat fishermen who will agree. I've seen fishermen, put big chunks of bait on their hook, and what are they catching? They're catching 80, 90, 100 pound catfish. And I think it's all in perspective. If you put a little tiny piece of bait on there, and a 100 pound catfish swims by it, he's probably not going to be likely to eat it. One thing I want to tell you guys about the hooks that I use is I always make sure that they're offset. And what I mean by offset is that the hook doesn't line up with the shank part of the hook, because they sell them in both ways, and I believe that if it's perfectly lined up, you have that slight chance that the fish could have it just right and it slides right out of his mouth. Whereas if you have it with an offset, you don't have that chance. So you can buy your hooks with an offset, and depending on the hook and how it's made, if it doesn't have the offset, you could take a pair of pliers and just give it a slight bend. I think the angle that they put on it's probably something like a 6-degree angle, but I mean, you don't have to get that technical. Just give it a little bend and eyeball it so that you can see kind of like the picture that it doesn't line up with the shank of the hook. You guys have asked what hooks I use, so here's all the hooks that I use that I keep in my tackle box. So I hope this video answers some of your questions about hooks, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.